The storm hit Kepler 442c like something alive and angry, transforming the quiet valley into a screaming nightmare of wind and rain that felt like liquid ice against her shelter's outer walls. Ji-woo huddled inside the emergency dome, watching stress. Readings climb higher as gusts over 300 kilometers per hour tried to tear her protection apart. The temperature outside had dropped to minus 43 degrees, cold enough to freeze human blood in seconds. Her suit's heating system was working so hard that power consumption had doubled. At current energy drain rates, she had maybe 30 hours of reliable life support remaining. The storm showed no signs of getting weaker through the shelter's single small window. Lightning revealed a landscape that had completely changed. The crystalline formations she had noticed earlier were now glowing brightly, creating a network of light that stretched across the entire valley floor. The pattern looked almost intentional, like a communication system linking distant points. The massive creature she had seen was nowhere visible, probably sheltered in some cave system that the orbital surveys had never detected. Ji-woo wondered how many other life forms were hiding on this world, waiting for the storms to pass before emerging to hunt or feed or simply continue their alien existence. Hour 12 brought her first real crisis. A section of the shelter's support framework began failing under the constant battering from hurricane force. Winds. The flexible material was designed to bend rather than break, but even the best engineering had limits when faced with weather that could destroy mountains. Ji-woo put on her helmet and activated full environmental protection before stepping outside to make emergency repairs. The moment she opened the shelter's airlock, the wind tried to knock her flat. Each step required careful placement and strong grips on anything solid to avoid being blown across the valley like a leaf. The suit's heads-up display showed wind speeds gusting to 350 kilometers per hour with temperature readings that dropped another 5 degrees while she worked. Using emergency repair tape and reinforcement struts, she managed to strengthen the failing support section. The work took 20 minutes and left her completely exhausted. Back inside the shelter, she discovered that exposure to the storm had drained an additional 3 hours of power from her suit's life support systems. The heating elements had worked overtime to keep her from freezing during the repair work. She was now facing a critical decision about power management. Continue running the shelter's full life support and risk complete power failure within 24 hours, or reduce heating to dangerous levels and hope the storm passed before hypothermia became a fatal problem. Ji-woo chose a compromise solution. She reduced the shelter's internal temperature to just above freezing while maintaining full air processing. The decision would make survival much more uncomfortable, but it would extend her power reserves long enough to outlast the storm. She wrapped herself in the emergency thermal blanket and began doing isometric exercises to maintain body heat. The movements also helped keep her mind occupied and prevented panic from setting in as the storm continued to rage around her tiny bubble of safety. Hour 18 brought an unexpected discovery. While monitoring external sensors to watch for structural damage, she noticed that the glowing crystalline formations were following specific patterns. The pulses of light moved in coordinated waves across the valley floor, like signals being passed from one location to another. This was not random chemical luminescence caused by radiation or atmospheric pressure. The crystals were communicating with each other in some form of organized network. The realization struck her with the force of lightning. The formations were not just geological features. They were part of a living system. Everything she had observed began making sense in a completely new way. The massive creature covered in crystalline patches, the network of light that responded to environmental changes, the patterns that seemed to show intelligence and coordination. The planet was not just alive. It possessed some form of collective consciousness. This changed everything about her survival strategy. If Kepler 442c had a planetary intelligence, then staying alive might. depend on understanding and communicating with that intelligence rather than simply enduring harsh weather and radiation. The implications were staggering. Other species had visited this world and died within hours, but maybe they had died because they approached the planet as invaders rather than guests. Maybe the environmental hazards were actually defensive systems designed to protect the planetary consciousness from hostile visitors. Hour 24 marked a full day on the surface. The storm was finally beginning to weaken. Wind speeds had dropped below 200 kilometers per hour, and external temperature was slowly climbing toward minus 30 degrees. Her power reserves stood at 60% better than expected. Thanks to the reduced heating requirements, Ji-Woo activated her communication array and transmitted her second status report. Day 2 storm conditions improving, all systems functional. Have made significant observations regarding planetary geological formations. Request extended analysis protocols for crystalline structures. What she did not transmit was her growing suspicion that the Galactic Council's failure to detect the planet's intelligence network was not accidental. Other species had superior scanning, technology, and analytical capabilities. They should have noticed the coordinated behavior of the crystalline formations. Perhaps some aliens knew about the planetary intelligence and were deliberately keeping it secret. Perhaps the Death World reputation was maintained to prevent other species from making contact with a consciousness that might be more advanced than any civilization in the galaxy. As the storm began to clear, revealing alien stars through thinning clouds, Ji-Woo prepared for her second day on Kepler 442c, with a completely different understanding of what she was facing. The planet was not trying to kill her. It was testing her to determine if she was worthy of communication. The crystalline formations continued their slow, pulsing patterns throughout the night like a heartbeat that connected every living thing on the world. Their light provided a strange comfort in the darkness, reminding Ji-Woo that she was not alone on this hostile world. There was intelligence. Here, vast patient intelligence that had been waiting for someone who could understand its language. When dawn finally came, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Ji-Woo emerged from her shelter to find the crystalline network had grown during the night. New formations had appeared near her camp, extending tendrils of light toward her equipment. The planetary intelligence was reaching out to make contact. She spent the early morning hours studying the new formations and beginning to develop theories about how communication might be possible. The crystals seemed to respond to electromagnetic signals and temperature changes. They also showed sensitivity to vibration and direct physical contact, using her multi-tool's various functions. Ji-Woo began attempting to establish basic communication with the nearest crystalline cluster. Simple patterns of electromagnetic pulses, mathematical sequences, and rhythmic vibrations. The responses were immediate and clearly intentional. The intelligence was eager to make contact. By mid-morning, she had established a basic protocol for information exchange. The planetary consciousness was curious about her technology, her biology, and especially her intentions. It seemed to understand that she was different from previous visitors who had arrived with extraction equipment and hostile agendas. The creature from her first day returned during the afternoon following the same path across the valley floor. This time, Ji-Woo was ready. She positioned herself along its route and waited with her communication equipment prepared. As the massive being approached, she could see its crystalline patches pulsing in perfect rhythm with the ground-based network. It was not just carrying the formations. It was an integral part of the planetary communication system, a mobile node that allowed the intelligence to observe and interact with visitors from a safe distance. When the creature stopped within 20 meters of her position, Ji-Woo activated her electromagnetic pulse function and transmitted the mathematical sequence she had been using with the stationary crystals. The creature's response was immediate. Its crystalline patches flashed in a complex pattern that conveyed both acknowledgement and evaluation. For the next hour, human and planetary intelligence communicated through light patterns and electromagnetic signals. Ji-woo gradually understood that she was being tested, evaluated for both intelligence and intent. The creature was, determining whether she represented a threat to the network or an opportunity for beneficial contact. The conversation ended when the creature resumed its journey across the valley, but not before transmitting a complex sequence that Ji-woo interpreted as coordinates. Following the indicated direction, she discovered a cave system that provided natural shelter from environmental hazards and access to an underground water source. Moving her equipment to the new location took most of the remaining daylight. But the cave system was clearly worth the effort. The passages were carved with geometric precision that suggested artificial construction. The walls were lined with crystalline formations that provided both illumination and warmth, creating a microenvironment suitable for long-term habitation. As her second night on Kepler 442c began, Ji-woo realized she had accomplished something unprecedented. The transport ship Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that ran through every metal beam and support strut. Captain Hun-soo had been flying ships through dangerous space for 40 years, and he knew the difference between a routine mission and a death sentence. This felt too much like the second option for his comfort. Ji-woo stood in the cargo bay, checking her survival equipment one more time. The Galactic Council had been very clear about what she could bring: basic, atmospheric recycler that would clean the air she breathed, temperature regulator to keep her from freezing or cooking, emergency shelter that could protect her from storms, water reclamation unit to turn any liquid into something she could drink. Enough food packets to last 5 days if she was careful. She also carried her grandfather's multi-tool, which had been in her family for 3 generations, and a small cutting from an earth plant sealed in biopreservative. The plant cutting was not on the official equipment list, but Ji-woo believed that having something alive and growing from home might help her stay focused on survival. Through the cargo bay windows, Kepler 442c grew larger and more threatening with each passing minute. The planet looked like an angry eye staring back at them. Red storms swirled across continents. Black mountains stabbed up through poisonous clouds. Lightning danced between layers of atmosphere in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Captain Hyun-soo's voice came through the communication system, sounding worried and tired. Dropping in 60 seconds. Landing zone is a valley between 2 mountain ranges. Radiation readings are bad, but your suit should handle them for a while. Weather shows clear. Skies for 4 hours, then a major storm system that will try to kill everything in its path. The other crew members gathered around the cargo bay to watch Ji-woo prepare for launch. Chief Engineer Min-ho had worked with her on 3 different worlds, where they built machines to make poisonous air breathable. He kept asking the same question over and over. "You sure about your shelter location?" "You absolutely sure." Ji-woo recited her plan like a prayer she had memorized. Eastern slope of the valley gives protection from wind and gets morning sunlight. Mineral scans show water ice 12 meters underground. If the readings are right, there might be hot springs creating small areas where the temperature is not deadly. The drop pod looked like a metal coffin with windows and rocket engines. Ji-woo climbed inside and strapped herself into the single seat. The interior was cramped and smelled like recycled air and fear. Every surface was covered with displays showing her vital signs: atmospheric readings and countdown timers. Launch sequence initiated. The computer announced in a voice that sounded completely calm about sending a human being to almost certain death. The pod shot away from the ship like a bullet fired from a gun. Ji-woo was pressed deep into her seat as acceleration tried to push her bones through the back of the chair. Through the small porthole, she watched Harmony's Edge shrink to a bright star, then disappear completely into the darkness of space for 20 minutes. She fell alone through the emptiness between the ship and the planet. The only sounds were her own breathing, the hum of life support systems, and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. She tried not to think about the fact that every previous expedition to this world had ended in death within hours. Atmospheric entry began as a gentle shaking that quickly became violent enough to rattle her teeth. The pod's heat shields glowed white-hot as they bit into the thick, poisonous atmosphere. Warning alarms began screaming as radiation levels spiked high enough to cook most alien species, then gradually decreased as they dropped below the worst electromagnetic storms. At 3,000 meters altitude, the drag chutes deployed with a EOE sound like thunder. Ji-Woo got her first real look at the surface through the porthole-twisted rock formations that looked like the bones of dead giants, deep canyons carved by rivers that had boiled away millions of years ago. Strange crystalline structures that caught the alien sunlight and threw it back in colors that had no names. The pod hit the ground with surprising gentleness. The landing systems worked exactly as designed, setting down on the flattest piece of ground in the valley. For several minutes, Ji-Woo stayed strapped in, listening to the absolute silence outside and watching her suit's sensors analyze the environment around her. External temperature -15 degrees and falling fast. Atmospheric pressure almost twice what humans were used to breathing. Radiation levels high enough to be dangerous, but not immediately lethal. Chemical composition of the air would burn her lungs and kill her in minutes if her suit failed. She took a deep breath of recycled. Ship air unsealed the pod's hatch and stepped onto the surface of Kepler 442c. The gravity hit her immediately. Each step required twice as much effort as walking on Earth. The extra weight pressed down on her shoulders and made her back ache within minutes. But Ji-Woo had trained in high-gravity environments, and her legs adapted quickly to the heavier conditions. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, painted in shades of red and gold by the alien sun. Wind-carved stone formations rose from the valley floor like sculptures created by insane artists. The silence was complete, except for the whistle of wind through rock and the steady hum of her suit keeping her alive. Her first priority was shelter. The weather data predicted a massive storm arriving in less than 6 hours, bringing temperatures cold enough to freeze human blood and winds strong enough to throw boulders through the air. The emergency shelter in her survival kit would provide basic protection, but she needed to find something better. Ji-Woo chose a spot against the eastern valley wall where ancient rock slides had created a natural windbreak. She began assembling the emergency shelter while fighting the heavy gravity that made every movement feel like she was working underwater. The shelter was a dome-shaped structure designed to maintain breathable air and livable temperature inside, while the outside world tried to kill everything it touched. Assembly required connecting dozens of support struts, sealing atmospheric barriers, and activating power systems that would keep her alive through the coming storm. 2 hours into the work, Ji-Woo noticed something the orbital surveys had completely missed. Small crystalline formations were growing from cracks in the rock face. They pulsed with faint internal light like the heartbeat of something alive. She collected samples in specimen containers, wondering what kind of chemistry could create living crystals. As she connected the final atmospheric seal, a violent tremor shook the ground beneath her feet. This was not an earthquake, but something else moving across the planet's surface. Through her helmet's audio sensors, she heard a rhythmic thumping sound approaching from the northern end of the valley. Ji-Woo grabbed her emergency scanner and climbed onto a large boulder to get a better view of whatever was making the sounds. What she saw through the scanner's display made her heart skip several beats. A creature the size of a city bus was walking across the valley floor on 6 massive legs. Each step created the tremors she had felt and the thumping sounds that echoed off the canyon walls. The creature's hide was covered with the same crystalline formations she had observed, growing from the rocks, giving it natural armor that sparkled in the alien sunlight. The beast seemed completely uninterested in her presence, following what appeared to be a well-worn path across the valley. As it passed within 50 meters of her half-assembled shelter, Ji-Woo held her breath and tried to become invisible. For 10 terrifying minutes, the creature continued its slow journey across the valley floor. Its crystalline patches caught and reflected sunlight, creating patterns of light. That seemed almost like communication signals. Finally, it disappeared behind a ridge to the south, leaving Ji-Woo alone with her racing heartbeat. She realized that the orbital surveys had missed active life forms on Kepler 442c, probably because the creatures moved too slowly to register on standard biological scanners. The planet was not just hostile because of weather and radiation. It was home to living things that could crush a human without noticing. Ji-Woo finished assembling her shelter. Just as the first signs of the approaching storm became visible on the horizon, a wall of dark clouds stretched from the ground to the upper atmosphere, flickering with electrical discharge that lit up the alien sky like a violent fireworks display inside. The completed shelter, she activated heating and communication systems. The time delay to the nearest Galactic Council monitoring station was 47 minutes each way, making real-time conversation impossible. She would be truly alone during the worst parts of her ordeal. Day 1, hour 8, she spoke into the recording device. Landing successful, shelter established, gravity adaptation proceeding normally. Have observed indigenous life forms not detected in previous surveys. Weather system approaching as predicted. All systems functioning within acceptable parameters. What she did not report was her growing understanding that surviving on Kepler 442c would require much more than simply enduring harsh environmental conditions. The planet was alive in ways the Council's instruments had failed to detect, and the crystalline formations might be more important than anyone realized. As the storm struck with the force of an angry god, Ji-Woo settled in for her first night on the Death World, listening to winds that could tear apart starships and wondering what other deadly surprises the planet was hiding from her. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ji-Woo stood in the observation deck, looking down at the biggest meeting room she had ever seen in her life. The chamber was so huge that clouds actually formed near the ceiling, and floating platforms held alien beings from hundreds of different worlds. Some aliens looked like giant insects with shiny green shells and clicking sounds coming from their mouths. Others were made of pure light that shifted colors when they talked. There were creatures that looked like floating jellyfish with tentacles that sparked with electricity, and beings made of living crystal that sang instead of speaking. Ambassador Taemin walked slowly across the speaking floor toward the center platform. His footsteps echoed in the enormous space, and Ji-Woo could see his hands shaking just a little bit. He had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity first asked to join the Galactic Council. The topic today was Kepler 442c, a planet that everyone called the Death World. It was a place where every single exploration team had died within hours of landing. The planet killed visitors so fast that most species refused to even talk about it anymore. A huge hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the deadly planet. It looked like a ball of angry red storms and black mountains that reached up into poisonous clouds. The surface temperature could freeze. Water solid 1 minute, then boil it away the next. The air was full of gases that would burn the lungs of most living things. Ji-Woo had studied every report about Kepler 442c during her years as an atmospheric engineer. She knew the planet had gravity, twice as strong as Earth, which would crush the bones of weaker species. The radiation levels were so high that most alien technology stopped working after a few hours. The weather changed from deadly cold to deadly hot faster than most beings could adapt. The Vorthan delegate stood up on its platform, making clicking sounds that the translation machines turned into words. Its body looked like a giant praying mantis covered in metal armor, and its eyes glowed red when it was angry. The creature spoke in a voice like grinding metal. Its translator made the words sound cold and dismissive in every language at once. Humans are weak, soft creatures that break easily. Your species cannot survive what much stronger beings have failed to endure. This death world kills everything that touches its surface within a few hours. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly like waves on water. Many alien species nodded their heads or made their own species sounds of approval. The Zenthari delegate, which looked like a massive floating jellyfish, pulsed with blue and green lights that meant it was laughing. The Krillian representatives clicked their claws together in a rhythm that sounded like mocking applause. Jiwoo felt her face, getting hot with anger. She had worked on 12 different worlds, helping to make them suitable for life. She had walked on planets where the air would kill humans in seconds and lived in environments that would terrify most aliens. But the Galactic Council kept treating humanity like children who needed protection. Taimin stood quietly in the center of the chamber waiting for the sounds to die down. He had learned over 3 years that showing anger or fear would only make the aliens think. Humans were even weaker than they already believed. When the chamber was quiet again, Taimin spoke clearly into the translation devices, his voice carried to every platform and was turned into hundreds of alien languages at the same time. Perhaps. You are making a mistake about what humans can do when they really need to survive. The Zenthari delegate pulsed brighter with what looked like amusement. Survive. The last team from our world lasted exactly 6 hours and 23 minutes before. The pressure changes cracked their protective shells like eggs. Your soft human bodies would last maybe 2 hours if you were very, very lucky. Other aliens began making sounds that their translators turned into laughter. Some species laughed by changing colors, others by making musical tones, and a few by releasing clouds of glowing gas. The whole chamber filled with the sound and sight and smell of alien amusement. Jiwoo had heard enough. She stepped forward from the observation area and began walking. Down the stairs toward the speaking floor, her engineering boots made sharp clicking sounds on the metal steps, and gradually the alien laughter began to fade as they noticed her movement. Every eye tentacle sensor and light-detecting organ in the chamber turned to watch the human woman walking calmly toward the center platform. Jiwoo had worked in dangerous places her whole life. She had fixed atmospheric processors while volcanoes erupted around her. She had repaired life support systems. In the vacuum of space, she was not afraid of aliens who had never done real work with their own hands. When she reached the speaking platform, Jiwoo looked up at hundreds of alien beings and spoke in a clear, strong voice. I volunteer to go to Kepler 4422. The chamber became completely silent. The kind of silence that happens when something shocking and unexpected occurs. Every alien stopped moving, stopped making sounds, stopped even breathing, if they needed to breathe. The Vorthan delegate was the first to break the silence. Its red eyes glowed brighter and its mandibles clicked rapidly. You volunteer to die on the death world. That is what you are saying. Jiwoo smiled the kind of smile that came from years of being underestimated. I am volunteering to survive on Kepler 442c for 72 hours. If I succeed, humanity gets full membership in the Galactic Council with voting rights. If I fail, then you can all continue believing that humans are too weak to deserve respect. The chamber erupted. In chaos, aliens began talking all at once in hundreds of languages. The translation devices could not keep up, and the air filled with overlapping voices, clicks, whistles, and musical tones. Some aliens were clearly angry, others seemed excited, and a few appeared to be placing bets on how quickly the human would die. Taimin grabbed Jiwoo by the arm and pulled her close. You do not have to do this, he whispered urgently. There are other ways to prove our worth. We can find different challenges that do not involve almost certain death. Jiwoo looked at her ambassador and friend with calm eyes. Some things cannot be proven with words or politics, she said quietly. They only understand strength they can see and measure. It is time to show them exactly what human determination looks like when we are pushed to our limits. The voting process took 2 hours. Alien delegates argued about rules and procedures and whether humans should be allowed to use any technology at all on the Death World. Finally, they agreed to basic survival equipment only. No advanced computers, no weapons, no communication with rescue ships, and absolutely no help if things went wrong. As the session ended and aliens began floating, swimming and crawling toward the exits, Ji-woo stood alone on the speaking platform looking up at the hologram of Kepler 442c. The red storms swirled across its surface, and lightning flickered in the poisonous atmosphere. She thought about her grandmother who had taught her to survive. In the Korean mountains during winter storms, she remembered learning to read weather patterns and find shelter in places that looked completely empty. She thought about all the alien worlds where humans had learned to adapt and thrive despite being told it was impossible. In 72 hours, she would either prove that human determination could overcome any challenge, or she would become another casualty of the Death World. But looking up at that angry red planet, Ji-woo felt something that the aliens could never understand. She felt excited. Dawn on Kepler 442c came with spectacular light shows as the alien sun struck the crystalline network covering the valley floor. Ji-woo emerged from her cave shelter to find the landscape transformed again. Where yesterday there had been scattered crystal formations, now there were clearly defined pathways of light connecting larger nodal points across the entire visible terrain. The communication network was responding to sunlight becoming more active as solar radiation powered whatever. Exotic chemistry made the crystals pulse and glow. Ji-woo spent the morning taking detailed recordings and measurements, gradually building a picture of how this planetary intelligence system functioned. She had brought basic scientific equipment as part of her survival gear: electromagnetic sensors, temperature monitors, radiation detectors, and a simple computer capable of pattern analysis. The readings she collected were unlike anything in human scientific databases. The breakthrough came when she decided to attempt direct interaction with one of the smaller crystal clusters near her shelter. Using her multi-tools electromagnetic pulse function, she sent a simple pattern of 3 short bursts into the crystalline structure. The response was immediate and unmistakable. The cluster flashed 3 times, then added a 4th pulse of its own. It was learning, Ji-woo whispered to herself, hardly believing what she was observing. The planetary intelligence was not only responding to her signals, but actively building upon them to create new communication patterns. Over the next several hours, she established increasingly complex exchanges with the local crystal network, simple mathematical sequences followed by basic geometric patterns, then more sophisticated interactions involving prime numbers and algebraic relationships. The intelligence demonstrated understanding of abstract concepts that required advanced mathematical reasoning. What amazed Ji-woo most was the speed at which the system learned. Each new concept she introduced was immediately incorporated into the network's responses and then shared with crystalline formations across the entire valley. The planetary intelligence was not just smart, it possessed instantaneous communication and information-sharing capabilities. The massive creature she had observed returned during the afternoon following its established route across the valley floor. This time, Ji-woo was prepared. She positioned herself directly in its path with her communication equipment ready to establish contact. As the creature approached, she could see the crystalline formations on its hide pulsing in perfect synchronization with the ground-based network. It was not simply carrying the crystals as some form of symbiotic relationship. The creature was an integral component of the planetary communication system. When the being stopped within 20 meters of her position, Ji-woo activated her electromagnetic pulse generator and transmitted the same mathematical sequence she had been using with the stationary formations. The creature's response was immediate and complex. Its crystalline patches began flashing in patterns that conveyed far more information than simple acknowledgement. For The next 90 minutes, human and alien intelligence engaged in the most remarkable conversation in galactic history. Ji-woo gradually understood that she was being evaluated not just for intelligence, but for intentions, attitudes, and fundamental compatibility with the planetary consciousness. The creature was asking questions through light patterns and electromagnetic signals. What was her purpose on this world? Did she represent a threat to the network? Did her species seek to exploit or destroy the planetary intelligence? Were humans capable of peaceful coexistence with radically different forms of consciousness? Ji-woo answered as honestly as she could, using the limited communication protocols they had established. She explained that she was here to prove human worthiness for galactic acceptance, that her species sought knowledge and partnership rather than domination, that humanity had always been curious about other forms of life and intelligence. The conversation revealed something that transformed her understanding of the entire situation. The creature showed her memory patterns encoded in crystalline structures, scenes of previous visitors from other species, arriving with extraction equipment, weapons, and hostile intentions. The planetary intelligence had defended itself by creating environmental hazards that killed invaders before they could cause damage. But some visitors had been different. A few species had approached with curiosity rather than aggression, and had been welcomed as guests rather than threats. These peaceful explorers had been allowed to study and learn before departing with gifts of crystalline technology and knowledge. Most remarkably, the creature showed her ancient memory patterns of humans, previous human visitors thousands of years ago who had somehow reached this world in primitive spacecraft. These early humans had established communication with the planetary network and been accepted as partners rather than invaders. The realization struck Ji-woo like physical impact. Humanity had been here before. The Galactic Council's test was not about proving human survival capabilities. It was about rediscovering humanity's forgotten connection to this ancient ally. The conversation ended when the creature transmitted a complex coordinate sequence and began moving toward a different section of the valley. Following its guidance, Ji-woo discovered an extensive cave system that provided perfect shelter from environmental hazards. The passages showed clear signs of artificial construction with smooth walls and geometric precision that no natural process could create. Moving her equipment to the new location required most of the remaining daylight, but the effort was worthwhile. The cave system contained chambers filled with crystalline formations that had been growing for millennia. The walls held what appeared to be historical records, patterns of light frozen in crystal that told the story of the planet's interactions with countless species over geological time spans. Most of the records showed brief violent encounters, species arriving with mining equipment attempting to harvest crystals being rejected by planetary defense systems before they could cause significant damage. A few showed longer interactions, peaceful species that had attempted communication and been welcomed into partnership arrangements. One set of records showed humans, not recent visitors, but ancient ones from humanity's prehistoric past. Humans, who had arrived in spacecraft that looked nothing like modern designs, but who had managed to establish communication with the planetary intelligence and been accepted as trusted allies. These ancient humans had helped refine the communication systems, had shared knowledge about other worlds, and had eventually departed, carrying gifts of crystalline technology that might have influenced human development in ways lost to history. The record suggested these early partnerships had lasted for generations, before the humans finally returned to their homeworld. Ji-woo realized she was not just the first human to survive on Kepler 442c. She was the first human to return after thousands of years of separation. The planetary intelligence had been waiting patiently for humanity to rediscover this forgotten relationship. As her third day on the Death World progressed, the crystalline formations around her new shelter began extending tendrils toward her equipment. The planetary intelligence was trying to establish permanent communication links that would survive even after her departure. The implications were staggering. If humanity could re-establish partnership with this planetary consciousness, they would gain access to communication technology, information storage systems, and scientific knowledge that surpassed anything available from the Galactic Council. The balance of power in galactic politics could shift dramatically. Ji Woo spent the evening hours learning to interface directly with the crystalline network, using her multi-tool as a translation device. The planetary intelligence was eager to share information about other worlds, other species and technologies that could transform human civilization. Her third status report was carefully neutral day. 3, all systems functioning normally. Extended exploration has revealed significant geological formations suitable for detailed scientific study. Shelter location provides excellent protection from environmental hazards. She made no mention of the planetary intelligence, the historical records, or the revelation about humanity's ancient connection to this world. Some secrets were too important to trust to communication channels that might be monitored by species with their own agendas. As alien stars appeared in the clearing sky, Ji Woo settled into her crystalline-lined shelter, knowing that she had accomplished something far more significant than surviving 72 hours on a hostile world. She had become humanity's first ambassador to reconnect with an ancient ally that possessed knowledge and capabilities beyond anything the Galactic Council could offer. The planetary intelligence pulsed gently around her shelter, like a vast heartbeat connecting. Every living thing on the world tomorrow would bring new challenges and new discoveries. But tonight, Ji Woo rested in the protection of a consciousness that had been waiting thousands of years for humanity to come home. Ji Woo's 4th day on Kepler 442c began with what could only be described as a celebration. The crystalline network across the entire visible landscape pulsed in synchronized patterns, creating waves of light that rolled from horizon to horizon, like aurora dancing across the ground. The planetary intelligence was expressing something that transcended language barriers: approval, acceptance, and perhaps even joy. She spent the morning exploring deeper into the cave system, using her portable lights to illuminate chambers that had never seen sunlight. The passages extended far underground, connecting to a network of caverns that seemed to span the entire continental mass. Each chamber was filled with crystalline formations that had been growing for thousands or perhaps millions of years. The walls contained layer upon layer of memory records patterns, preserved in crystal that told the complete history of the planet's interactions with visiting species. The deeper she went, the older the records became, showing encounters that stretched back through geological ages. Most of the ancient records showed the same pattern: species arriving with extraction equipment, attempting to harvest the valuable crystals, being eliminated by environmental defense systems before they could cause significant damage. The planetary intelligence had been protecting itself from exploitation for millions of years, but scattered among the hostile encounters were records of peaceful contact. Species that had approached with curiosity rather than greed, had been welcomed as guests and allowed to study the network. These visitors had been granted access to advanced knowledge before eventually departing with gifts of crystalline technology. The most remarkable discovery came in the deepest chamber she could safely reach. Here, the crystal formations were massive structures that reached from floor to ceiling, like pillars supporting the mountain above. The memory patterns stored in these ancient crystals showed events from humanity's distant past. Humans had been here before. Not recently, but during humanity's early space exploration period, when Earth's technology was primitive compared to galactic standards. These ancient human visitors had arrived in spacecraft that looked nothing like modern designs, vessels that seemed to be powered by some form of crystalline technology. The memory patterns showed these early humans establishing communication with the planetary intelligence through methods similar to what Ji Woo had developed. They had been accepted as partners rather than threats, and had remained on the world for what appeared to be several generations. These ancient humans had helped refine the communication networks had shared. knowledge about Earth and human biology, and had participated in expanding the planetary intelligence's understanding of biological consciousness. The partnership had been beneficial for both species. Most significantly, the records showed these early, humans eventually departing with gifts of advanced crystalline technology that might have influenced human development in ways completely lost to recorded history. The planetary intelligence had been waiting for humanity to return. Ever since. Ji-woo realized the Galactic Council's test had deeper implications than anyone understood. The other species knew about humanity's ancient connection to this world. They were not testing human survival capabilities, they were forcing humanity to rediscover a relationship that could dramatically alter the balance of power in galactic politics. As she made her way back toward her shelter, the crystalline formations throughout the cave system began pulsing in new patterns. The planetary intelligence was preparing something special for her final day on the surface. When Ji-woo reached her shelter, she found the crystalline formations had grown significantly during her absence. Tendrils of crystal now extended directly to her equipment, creating physical connections between her technology and the planetary network. The intelligence was establishing permanent communication links. She spent several hours learning to interface directly with the expanded network, using her multi-tool as a translation device. The planetary intelligence began sharing information at an incredible rate. Technical specifications for crystalline technology, energy systems that could power entire civilizations, communication networks that operated faster than light, scientific knowledge about the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. The information download was overwhelming. Ji-woo's portable computer systems could barely handle the data stream. The planetary intelligence was giving humanity access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge and technological development. More importantly, the network began teaching her how to grow and maintain crystalline communication devices. Simple techniques that would allow humans to establish permanent contact with the planetary intelligence even after returning to Earth. The knowledge was a gift that could transform human civilization. During the afternoon, the massive creature returned, but this time, it was not alone. 3 similar beings approached, her shelter following the same path across the valley. Their crystalline patches pulsed in perfect harmony, creating a light show that was both beautiful and clearly communicative. The creatures arranged themselves around her shelter, forming a protective circle that would guard her through the final night. Their presence was both honor guard and ceremonial escort, recognizing her successful communication with the planetary intelligence. Ji-woo understood that she had achieved something unprecedented. In galactic history, no previous visitor had been granted this level of access to the planetary consciousness. No other species had been trusted with the advanced knowledge and technology that was now being freely shared. As her 4th night on Kepler 442c began, the entire crystalline network entered a state of heightened activity. Patterns of light flowed across the landscape in complex waves that seemed to carry information between distant locations. The planetary intelligence was communicating, with nodes across the entire world informing them of the successful contact with humanity. The creature guards remained motionless throughout the night, their crystalline patches providing gentle illumination that turned the area around her shelter into a sanctuary of light and safety. Ji-woo spent the hours reviewing the technical information she had received and preparing her final status report. The data she had gathered would revolutionize human understanding of consciousness communication, technology, and the nature of intelligence itself. But she knew the Galactic Council could never be allowed to learn the full extent of what she had discovered. Her final status report would mention discovering interesting geological formations with potential scientific value. She would request permission for follow-up scientific expeditions to study the unique crystalline structures. What she would not report was the existence of a planetary intelligence that possessed technology and knowledge far beyond anything the Galactic Council had achieved. As dawn approached on her fifth and final day, Ji-woo began preparing for extraction. The transport ship would arrive in 12 hours to take her back to the Galactic Council chambers where she would prove that humans could survive on the Death World. But survival had been only the beginning. The real achievement was re-establishing humanity's ancient partnership with a consciousness that had been waiting thousands of years for their return. The crystalline fragment she would carry back to Earth was more than just proof of her success. It was a communication device that would allow permanent contact between human and planetary intelligence. The planetary network had chosen humanity. As its partner species, after millions of years of waiting, the Galactic Council's test had accidentally reconnected two ancient allies who together possessed the knowledge and technology to reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. As the alien sun rose on her final morning, Ji-woo watched the crystalline network pulse with patterns of farewell and anticipation. The planetary intelligence knew that humanity would return not as single explorers, but as partners ready to resume an ancient alliance that predated galactic civilization itself. The Death World had revealed its greatest secret. Kepler 442c was not a hostile environment. It was the home of humanity's oldest and most powerful ally in the galaxy. Ji-woo's final morning on Kepler 442c began with the most spectacular display she had witnessed during her entire stay. The crystalline network across the entire visible landscape pulsed in synchronized waves that created rolling patterns of light. From horizon to horizon, the planetary intelligence was saying goodbye in a language of pure illumination that needed no translation. The massive creatures that had guarded her shelter throughout the night began their departure ceremony, moving in slow procession around her camp. Their crystalline patches flashed in complex sequences that conveyed respect, gratitude, and anticipation for future contact. The beings understood that this was not an ending, but the beginning of renewed partnership. Between species, Ji-woo spent her remaining hours on the surface carefully packing the gifts the planetary intelligence had provided. The most important was a crystalline fragment that would maintain permanent communication between Earth and Kepler 442c. The device was small enough to conceal in her personal equipment, but it represented a breakthrough that could transform human civilization. She also carried detailed recordings of the communication protocol's technical specifications for crystalline technology and, most importantly, the historical records proving humanity's ancient connection to this world. The information would remain classified until human leadership could decide how to proceed with re-establishing the partnership. The transport ship Harmony's Edge appeared as a bright star in the afternoon sky, growing larger as it approached the extraction coordinates. Captain Hyun-soo's voice crackled through her communication system with barely concealed relief. Extraction team deploying. In 30 minutes, prepare for immediate departure. Ji-woo transmitted her final status report from the surface mission completed successfully. 72 hours achieved with all systems functional. Extensive geological survey completed have identified significant mineral formations with potential scientific applications, ready for immediate extraction. What she included in her encrypted personal logs was far more significant. Detailed documentation of first contact with planetary intelligence. Historical evidence of ancient human presence on world technical specifications for advanced crystalline technology, communication protocols for ongoing diplomatic contact. The extraction shuttle touched down with precision, its pilots clearly eager to complete their mission and escape what they still believed was a death world. Chief Engineer Minho greeted Ji-woo with amazement and disbelief. "You actually survived," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "The entire Galactic Council is in emergency session. Half the species' representatives are demanding proof that you were not secretly resupplied as the shuttle lifted off." Ji-woo pressed her face to the viewport, watching Kepler 442c shrink below her. The crystalline network was pulsing in farewell. Patterns, synchronized waves of light that followed the shuttle's trajectory until atmospheric interference blocked the view. She touched the hidden communication device, knowing the connection would remain active across any distance back aboard. Harmony's Edge. The crew treated her like someone who had returned from the dead. Captain Hyunsu kept asking for details about survival techniques, while Minho wanted technical data about environmental conditions. Neither man could imagine that. She had spent most of her time engaged in diplomatic negotiations with a planetary consciousness. The debriefing was conducted by quantum communication link with the Galactic Council chambers. Ambassador Tae-min participated from the council station, his image flickering due to transmission delays. His relief at seeing her alive was obvious, even through the poor connection. The survival period has been verified, announced the Zenthari delegate, its bioluminescent patches dim with disappointment. Humanity has fulfilled the requirements of our challenge. Full council membership is hereby granted with all associated voting rights and privileges. The Vorthan delegates' mandibles clicked with irritation. We demand detailed examination of survival, methods employed. No previous expedition has achieved even 24 hours of surface survival. How did this soft, weak species accomplish what our strongest warriors could not? Ji-woo smiled slightly as she prepared her response. Adaptation to environmental conditions proceeded according to standard human survival protocols. The planet's resources proved more accessible than initial surveys indicated. Basic shelter construction and resource location techniques were sufficient to maintain life support. For the required duration, it was technically accurate, Shiha.